thank you everybody for coming today. Not a big crowd. I mean, I don't know if it's bigger if we just have like all people come. Actually, we had a couple of people asking if they could join us, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Like,
We didn't know what to expect. You get to be the icebreaker. You're the very first presenter for the wellness committee.
Okay.
So.
No, thanks for letting me do this.
Yeah.
So I have been. Some of you might have been here before in the lectures that we have done before. So basically, this is a continuum on the based on like healthy diet, lifestyle changes, stuff like that. So I just wanted to touch base on probiotics, prebiotics, and GMOs today, and see if we can cover some topics there. So my first question to the audience is, what sources do you use to kind of establish whether you want to go with this diet or that diet, or use certain foods or not use certain foods? Like, what sources would you typically use to determine that?
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Word of mouth. Like I know.
Word of mouth, okay.
Yeah, like I know this one doctor I work with. He's always telling me about plant-based diets, so I kind of went with that.
So physicians, providers will be a good source.
Yeah.
Sure. What else would you guys think of? Internet, sure. I think for most people, internet and talking to doctors or going to different websites will probably be the best bet. So the question arises, which websites do we believe if they have like accurate information, reliable information, and which sites are just like blogs, people are just feeling like writing something and they just write stuff and you don't know whether they are true or not. So in general, the biggest problem is that a lot of information out there is false. So there is so much information out there that for the normal person, it's overwhelming to know which information to start with and which one to leave, and then if there's class of information, which ones do we believe? So I think part of the confusion is that lots of information coming from the meat industry and the dairy industry, the big pharma, tries to do studies which are not really peer-reviewed studies and studies which we can rely on. These are industry-funded studies, so they are like asking a certain kind of medicine maker to kind of fund a study, and then they will find that, okay, this medicine works better than medicine B, because of course the investigators were being funded and the study was being funded by the industry. So that kind of creates a conflict of interest, and that's why we're looking for studies. We should make sure they are independent studies and not funded by any organization. So that's one thing. The other thing is the sample size of the study. So if one person says, okay, we had used certain foods or used certain medicines, we had a lot of benefit, other people did not have the same benefit, then we kind of know that that's probably not what's going to work for majority of people. So you need to have a big sample size of people recruited in a study to know whether the study is really working or not. And of course, what we call reputable journals with high impact factor. So certain journals are known to be better than others, especially if they are ones that are cited a lot in literature. So things like New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, BMJ, these are very reputable journals. So these tend to have more reliable information than others. So I think those are good startup points for knowing where to get our information from. So this is again kind of a sad situation here, that all the big groups out there, all the big healthcare organizations out there, like American Diabetes Association, American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, they have a lot of their funding coming from groups which they are actually supposed to be fighting or kind of telling us not to use food stuff from. So like American Diabetes Association gets a lot of funding from Dannon, which is one of the world's largest dairy makers, and Kraft, which is again makes a lot of processed meats, and Bumblebee Foods, same deal. Same deal with American Cancer Society. Tyson is one of the world's largest meat producers. Yum, again, is the owner of Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell. So one wonders, how can you take money from them and tell them that they are not providing you nutritious food or food that is good for you? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because without these sponsors, we won't have these organizations. But if they prop up with you all the money, you can't speak against them. So you have to kind of walk a very tight rope there. Same deal with the American Heart Association. And I just wanted to draw your attention, if you guys watch Netflix or do a little bit of YouTube. There's a new documentary. Actually, this guy is very impressive. I forget his name. But he is also the maker of a documentary called Cowspiracy, which talks about how bad factory farming is and why we should not be eating the processed meats, especially the processed meats. And he made another documentary this year. It's called What the Hell? And it has amazing information as to what's the conflict of interest and what. Have you seen that, Brenda?
Yes.
I just watched 2 days ago. I was kind of amazed, like how good work he does every time.
I know. It makes you never want to touch meat again. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's a sad story the way meat is raised here. So so it's an amazing documentary. I'll recommend you guys. It's like 1.5 hours probably. It's not very long, but a lot of good information out there.
Netflix.
And then this famous quote, which just reminds me that this is from Claudia Coons, and she says, of course, this was about the World War II, so this is in a different context, but there in her book, the Nazi Conscience, she says, the English follow the principle where when one lies, it should be a big lie, and one should stick to it. They keep their lies even at the risk of looking ridiculous. So as there's this Bleuler's axiom, which says if you repeat a lie 1,000 times, it becomes the truth. People start believing it. If you tell the same thing to a person over and over again, then eventually it becomes a truth. At least it's intercepted as a truth. So I think that's the same thing happening with the meat industry, because there's so much of information, and repeatedly they do these studies which are funded by all these big pharma and the meat and dairy industry. So even if there's good studies, there's bad studies. So people are like, I don't know, maybe they're not that bad. Maybe it's a controversial issue. When the truth is that it's not a controversial issue. It's just an issue of misinformation by creating a lot of information out there, half of which is false. So coming to today's topic, so I briefly wanted to touch the definition of prebiotics. Now, prebiotics are different from probiotics. So the biggest difference is the way to think about prebiotics is these are basically fermentable fibers. So these are anything that's rich in fiber is a prebiotic. So legumes, whole grains, onions, leeks, rye, oats, everything that's rich in fibers naturally will be rich in prebiotics. And of course there's more scientific distinction as the oligosaccharides or the short chain sugars, what they chemically are. So the good way to think about it is as the seed and the soil. So the probiotic is the bacteria, we all know that. So we consume a lot of probiotics as supplements sometimes, which again is not the best way to consume it because they're probably not living anymore in there. But we'll come to that later. But basically, seed is the live bacteria. That's the probiotic. Prebiotic is the seed, the soil or the substrate on which the bacteria grows. So, as you can imagine, if you just have the seed, it won't germinate and give us all the benefits unless you have the right soil. So you need both. That's why I always try to tell my patients, you need the probiotics, that's a short-term fix, but it won't stay there all the time. So you need to give the nice nurturing environment, which is the prebiotics. That will allow the right bacteria to grow. That's why we need both. But prebiotics more so because the body can then sustain its own right kind of bacteria to grow. So some of the probiotics, these were still kind of new names to me, I'm learning about them, but a lot of stuff, mostly in the Asian cultures, like kombucha is something we're trying to get here through our dietary so that people, after they're on a clear liquid diet, they can go on this instead of Sprite and more processed drinks. But that's green tea, a fermented green tea. And since it's fermented, anything that's sugar can form small traces of alcohol in it because of the process of fermentation. But it's not something that people can get intoxicated on or anything. So it's basically fermented green tea, kombucha, and then there's yogurt. That's the most common one that most people use. But then kefir, miso, tempeh, all of these are different. Tempeh is more like soy based, just like tofu, but it's fermented, easy to digest. Those are the different, and lots of them are available in Walmart. I was surprised, like kombucha is available here in our Walmart. I think one or two other, yogurt of course, but most of them we can find in like a Whole Foods or like Fresh Thyme. All those food groceries will probably have those. Prebiotics, again, these are fibers, anything that are rich in fibers, lots of fruits and vegetables as well. The onions, leek, garlic, raw oats, bananas, apples, lots of things that are rich in fibers are naturally rich in prebiotics. So have you guys heard of the FODMAPs diet? That's kind of an extreme diet. I don't know if you should call it extreme, but essentially it's a therapeutic diet for severe irritable bowel syndrome. So it's a list of foods to eat and foods to avoid, very well validated in medicine. And I just picked up this slide from Up to Date. But basically, this is a representation that prebiotics essentially are the oligosaccharides or the short chain foods that are listed in the FODMAPs. And so, in a way, some people can argue that, okay, this is not good for IBS because you're supposed to be avoiding a lot of those foods. But we'll come to why, even for irritable bowel syndrome, it's a good source of healing. But essentially, that's a short chain sugar ingredient. So here, I just wanted to touch base on just a very common list of naturally rich prebiotic foods. As you can see, these are very common fresh fruits and vegetables, most of them, like onions, leeks, beets, garlic, radishes, cabbage is, again, if you ferment it, it becomes the sauerkraut. Fruits, again, bananas, berries, apples, mangoes. Honey is rich in source of prebiotics because fructose can form fructooligosaccharides. Again, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, lots of us use those, legumes, quinoa. So lots of different foods, but they are very naturally rich in prebiotics, so they will allow the growth of the good bacteria. And guess what? When the good bacteria grow, there's not enough space for the bad bacteria to grow. So it's only one or the other that can grow. And we see a lot of C. diff infections, a lot of UTIs, people coming back all the time. We wonder why do these guys get these all the time, other than, of course, using antibiotics indiscriminately. This is a very interesting slide to me, and this shows how science evolves over the time. For a long period of time, scientists kept wondering, why are there a group of compounds called oligosaccharides or short-chain sugars in breast milk, in human breast milk? Why? Because babies don't have the enzymes to digest those. So they would just scratch their heads, why would nature create oligosaccharides or sugars that the baby can't digest? What's the point in having those? Eventually, they found the reason, as they usually do in science. They found that, okay, these are not directly digestible by the baby's alimentary canal, but they will allow, or they are the substrate again, just like prebiotics are, they will allow the growth of the good bacteria, the first two here, the bifidobacterium and the bacteroids. And by doing that, they are inhibiting the growth of Escherichia coli or E. coli and C. diff. So again, it's either or. So either you have the good bacteria growing or the bad bacteria like E. coli growing, causing hemolytic uremic syndrome and whatnot in kids. Many kids have died from contaminated beef, which contains HES E. coli bacteria. But basically, the idea is that there will be someone living in here. We have to decide what we will let live: C. diff, E. coli, or the bacteroids and all the bifidobacterium, all the good ones. So the HMOs or the HMOs, they are basically the human milk oligosaccharides that have great properties, not only prebiotic, but also they have anti-inflammatory properties, which we'll come to in a moment, why it's so important to take prebiotics, because they help us fight naturally the inflammation. So this is a very good slide from the website nutritionfacts.org, which is run by Michael Greger, a great physician. So basically, this dispels the myth when we say that, okay, only meat is bad and eggs are okay. And this tells us why even eggs are not safe. And this is a very, very well validated, scientifically proven study. So basically, let's start with the red meat. All of us know World Health Organization, I think they came back a couple of years ago. They told us why red meat is bad, and red meat, processed red meat is a definitive carcinogen, which means that over the years, if a person consumes a certain quantity of red meat, they are very likely to get cancer. And then they said red meat, which is like unprocessed probably, is probably probable carcinogen, which means a lesser risk for cancer. So this took hundreds, I don't know how many years, but the meat lobbying industry fought hard against them not to say, but eventually that's what they said, okay, there's too many of deaths from cancer, we have seen a direct link, so we have to acknowledge it. So that's what happened. However, this is more interesting. We are now finding that meat, and not the cholesterol in the meat, of course, beef and all those things are, that's why the concept of lean meat, they don't have that much of fats and cholesterol. Cholesterol is of course a risk for heart disease, we all knew that. But we did not know that carnitine, which is, and some people take carnitine in their, like especially guys who go to the gym, they will take creatinine and carnitine in their energy drinks and protein shakes and whatnot. Carnitine is going to be broken down, well, it's absorbed by the intestine first, and then it's broken down in the liver into something called TMA, or trimethylamine. TMA is trimethylamine. So then the liver converts it using this enzyme FMO into TMAO, very, very notorious molecule for causing reactive oxygen species formation, lots of cascade inflammatory reactions ending in cholesterol plaque buildup. So basically, it clogs up our arteries. Red meat, carnitine, processed by the body, clogs up the artery. And this is not cholesterol. This is naturally carnitine, which is a component of red meat, not a white meat, more so the red meat. Now, so why are these other items here? The cheese, some eggs, why are these here? Because they contain another molecule called choline. And choline was touted as a very healthy molecule by the egg industry, like we have choline, so it's good for you. The problem is, it's not as good for you if you don't have the right kind of bacteria growing in your gut. So if you have a diet which is high in choline, the body will again form it into molecules which are similar to TMAO, or I think it's TMAO that eventually is formed. And that has a similar effect in clogging the arteries, having heart attacks, strokes, all the dementia that we talk about. They're not really Alzheimer's. We were talking yesterday, Stephanie and I, that they're not really Alzheimer's dementia. They're more what we call multi-infarct mixed dementias, where a lot of cholesterol plaques are forming in the brain, and people prematurely are going into dementia in their 60s, which is very unnatural because Alzheimer's should be happening more in the 80s. So this is a small slide to say that although it's hard to sugarcoat things, meat is not safe for a variety of reasons. And I have said that in my earlier lectures too, not only for cancers, but also now we know for heart disease, strokes, memory loss, lots of different processes, all of them because of formation of reactive oxygen species. So this is a very, very academic slide, but essentially I just wanted to show a connection that the prebiotic fibers essentially are broken by the good bacteria, or they call it the microbiota, into SCFAs, or the short-chain fatty acids. The best molecule that the body can produce naturally is like the body's natural steroid. It helps you calm down the inflammation. So instead of popping in prednisone, if you take enough prebiotics, our body will naturally heal because SCFAs, or short-chain fatty acids, which are propionate, butyrate, amazing molecules. And guess what? Not only they calm down inflammation, now we are finding that they are creating satiety, or a feeling of fullness, so that people are not overeating, especially propionate. And all this information is from very reputable journals, high impact factor journals that have done studies on huge sample size. So they're very credible information. Nobody's kind of saying that, okay, maybe, maybe not. That's not the case here. So propionate creates a sensation of delayed gastric emptying because the stomach is full, so you don't feel hungry, so people don't overeat. But also it might inhibit adipogenesis or formation of fat cells. That's why it's so amazing to have all these asparagus, onions, leeks, ginger, garlic, all these foods, especially if you can throw it all together in a blender in the morning and just, I mean, depending on what stuff you like, if you can throw 6 or 7 different items together and just blend it, that's what I do every morning. That's my breakfast. I don't have like anything formed in terms of carbohydrate. That is amazing, very high in energy, and it helps you just keep your arteries clean and inflammation to a minimum. Now again, this is a slide just showing that we should always think of foods as foods that create inflammation, which we don't want, because we don't want to have COPD exacerbation, asthma exacerbation. We don't want to have psoriasis, eczema, or foods that will subside the inflammation, which are, of course, these guys on top: fruits, vegetables, nuts. I put fatty fish there because I want to be impartial in terms of presenting the information, but this comes with the caveat that fish, unfortunately, the way we are using Roundup and glyphosate and all the herbicides, and they're polluting our waters, there's a lot of mercury and lead going into the water especially, and fish is a great reservoir for mercury poisoning. There's a condition called Minamata disease that happens in Japan. People get like clawed fingers, but that's an extreme version. So fish, although it's good anti-inflammatory if it's like the wild-caught, wild Alaskan salmon or something, but most of the other places, unfortunately, there's a lot of contamination now. So even if you get the anti-inflammatory benefits, the extreme amount of mercury in the food is probably not a good idea to have it on a daily basis. Because I always tell my patients that if you eat in moderation, no matter whether it's, I'm not saying that you should eat at all, but and people have different cultures and beliefs, so if they want to eat meat, if they eat in moderation, instead of 3 times a day, maybe once a day, or just skip 3 days, just do like meatless Mondays, do 2 or 3 days they don't eat meat. That way they're giving the liver a fighting chance to detoxify it. Because then the liver has a chance that, okay, this is the toxic load, I'll get rid of it, and we'll be fine. There's excellent enzymes in the body naturally, catalase, SOD or superoxide dismutase, glutathione. They are amazing molecules that will naturally detoxify anything. So either if we intermittently fast, like not eat food for 12 hours, 24 hours, there's different plans like 5:2 diet, 4:3 diet, where people will say, okay, we'll eat 4 days a week, 3 days we are just doing vegetable juices or just doing water or something, that's 1 meal a day or something. So if you restrict the calories, then the liver gets an amazing opportunity to fight all these toxic chemicals which are stored in the adipocytes or the fat cells. But if we constantly load the body and never miss a meal, unfortunately the body doesn't have the chance. And evolution-wise, that's how we have become hunter-gatherers and people going through years where there was excess of food, and then they had these periods where either they're not eating at all, just like animals hibernate, or as humans they did not have food. So they had these waxing, waning periods of eating, and that worked fine because there was always a famine, but now there's no famine. There's food 3 times a day. So all these inflammation foods, fried foods, soda, sweetened beverages, refined carbs, all of them are really not good for us. Any questions about all this stuff? Okay, cool. With kids, unfortunately, there's some studies, but the studies are not as strong as in adults. So I just wanted to pull up a slide, not just to make sure that we are presenting all sides of the story. There's some benefits with prebiotics and probiotics for kids who have extreme eczema, but not for all the kids with minor eczema and allergies. But they said that the WHO, or the World Allergy Association, they recommended that if a mom had a kid who was having severe allergies, then they can consider taking prebiotics and probiotics on a regular basis so that the next kid don't have the same allergies. And they have been found to be safe. So same thing here about prebiotics reduce eczema incidence in first 2 years of life. Some kids have bad, what we call atopic dermatitis or eczema of the elbows, knees, so it helps. This slide again talks about a basic mechanism that why food is a necessary evil. Of course, it's good for the body, nourishes the body. But in the process of digesting the food, or any process, breathing, running, there's catabolism or breakdown of glucose, uptake of oxygen to liberate the energy. And that oxygen, when it breaks down, it creates what we call free radicals, which are just high spinning unpaired electrons that are going to bind to all these different molecules in the cell and cause inflammation, reaction. So that's how the ROS, or the reactive oxygen species, are born. We can't do anything about it. We gotta breathe and eat and do stuff like that. So it's a side effect of natural metabolism in the body. But then, as we're talking, the best way to reduce that is by consuming more of these guys. The more we eat foods that are naturally rich in antioxidants and micronutrients, the better our chance of fighting the reactive oxygen species, the better our chance of fighting chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension, stroke, heart attacks. So all these foods naturally found to be rich. Again, I put fatty fish there, but the mercury contamination is a problem. But whole grains, dark leafy vegetables, beets are amazing. They are not only rich in anti-cancer molecules, but also they help reduce blood pressure and dementia. So it's amazing if you can have more beets. Ginger, turmeric, again, they're very common spices in India actually. So people would eat them in lentils and stuff. But amazing foods help. Actually, garlic helps to thin the blood. So it's kind of a natural coumadin or a blood thinner. But it's amazing how these things work in terms of subsiding the inflammation, so the body does not react and create more molecules which are causing damage to us. So beetroots again.
Do we need to turn it off and then restart
No,
it?
I think it will just work. Is it counting now? Well, it's
Yeah.
only 27. I think it waits till 30, then it does
Okay.
And then just sit it here.
that. Exactly. So the beetroots, beets release, I think they help in the formation of nitric oxide. And that is a natural vasodilator, or dilates the blood vessel. So it helps to control blood pressure naturally. So people, if they just add a little bit of beetroot in their morning juice blender and just eat it with other stuff, it will just naturally help control the blood pressure. They don't need to take lisinopril and stuff like that. It's very effective. And then it has all these chemical molecules. We don't need to remember these names, but I just put it here to note that this is well validated in the studies that they inhibit the formation of those oxidative stress molecules and the reactive nitrogen species that we were talking about. So, so beets are amazing. Again, it just talks about why it's a cognition enhancer, which means it will prevent formation of dementia. Because think about it, if the blood vessels are dilated, there's more blood going to the brain. If they're clogged with all these cholesterol plaques, there's no blood going to different areas. So those areas will have mini strokes or infarcts where there's not enough blood. So nitric oxide is a natural vasodilator. It dilates the blood vessels, so there's better blood flow. So it makes total sense why people won't get dementia if they're eating more beets. Berries, again, they're very rich in natural antioxidants, help growth of the good bacteria, the bacteroids, and the Acinetobacter. So amazing molecules, all these different molecules, the flavonoids, the resveratrol, the allicin, found in different foods like legumes, green leafy vegetables. Red wine contains resveratrol, tea contains thiamine, I think. Yeah, so these are all good molecules. And what do? They inhibit formation of arachidonic acid. That's exactly what steroids do. That's the mechanism of action for steroids. They will block the arachidonic acid breakdown. So it's, in a way, it's just naturally taking the steroids without having the side effects of those steroids. So this just shows like what are the different diseases in which reactive oxygen molecules are implicated. Things like diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, chronic lung disease, osteoarthritis, and heart disease. So, and these are the good molecules, the good guys fighting those bad reactive oxygen species that are formed in the liver. So portion control, intermittent fasting, cutting down on meat, dairy, eggs, those are the best options to living long, healthy life, free of diseases, and that's what the goal is for all of us. Now, any questions? This was we are done with the prebiotic probiotic section of the talk. Any questions? Okay. So I'll go ahead with GMOs. What do people think of when they think of GMOs? Have you heard that term before?
I know, me too. I
Okay.
know it's not
Genetically
really
modified
good, so.
organisms?
Say that again?
Genetically
You got it.
modified organisms?
Yep. It's genetically modified organisms or genetically altered foods. So why did we need GMO foods? What exactly they are? So it's kind of funny, but still can be frightening, I guess, depending on who eats it. There's a need for genetically modified foods because there are too many people on Earth. We just realized after the Industrial Revolution, we have 7 billion people now on planet Earth, and that's way too many people to be feeding foods just by growing it the natural way. So the scientists realized if they can splice out a gene from a fish or from a deer, it sounds so creepy, and then they combine it with strawberry gene, they might find a gene that has resistance to bugs. They might find a gene that just replicates very fast so that the strawberries are bigger, larger, quicker. That's what we want. Like, we want more food in a shorter time span in a smaller area. And GMOs are amazing in meeting that criteria. So it's easy for us in the developed world to kind of castigate all these bad effects that GMO foods creates over time. Nobody dies overnight eating GMO. Oh shoot, I ate a GMO corn and I'll die tomorrow. That never happens. These things happen over years, 10, 20 years, that they show their effects. But the truth is, many people are starving in Africa, and if it was not for the GMO foods, they would probably have died from malnutrition. So the Green Revolution, that's something they call it in India in the 1970s, I think, through which they just tremendously increased their food supplies, and people didn't have malnutrition. So I think there was a reason why these foods were invented, or these chromosomes were kind of brought in together by a lot of rigorous scientific research. So we should give them credit for that. But now what we are realizing is that we are doing something to our bodies that has never happened in the history of mankind. Never in all these years of evolution, since Homo sapiens or the human species has tread Earth, have we seen this kind of bizarre food products. We haven't seen a gene from a fish combined with a gene from a kale plant and let's see what happens, because the body hasn't seen that. So we hope, if natural selection and Darwin are true, eventually the body will learn over thousands of years. But there's a possibility that we might not live those many years if we consume this kind of food, because the way it's causing harm, it's tremendous. So now in the US, 94% of the soy is GMO, 90% of cotton is GMO. What is this? 88% corn crop is GMO, and 90% of sugar beets. So those are high numbers, and this was just opinion poll about what people thought about GMO foods and what do they want. Most people said, are foods containing GMO safe to eat? Most people say not sure, and I'm not surprised. I mean, some people say, yeah, they're safe, and some people just the same argument. Like, there's industry-funded studies and neutral studies. So who do we believe? So people are like, I don't know, probably, yeah, sure. So that's where people are, and we just wanted to kind of discuss why they're not safe. Clearly they're not safe. They're not our first choice. If we had a choice of going organic, there are three kinds, of course: organic, conventional, GMO foods. If we had a choice, I think most of us would just eat organic, but those are pricey things, and all of us cannot. It's easy for us to say, but lots of people are on food stamps and they can't even afford that kind of food. So, but I will just present the information and let you guys decide as to how much you want to change your diet. But basically, this is from the world's most reputable journal, NEJM, or New England Journal of Medicine. So these are just normal doctors. They're not affiliated with any meat industry or any dairy industry. So they're just writing what they're finding in terms of seeing their patients and stuff like that. So what they found, as you can see, well, the first problem is corporate America. We cannot put we are not supposed. The maker of the GMO foods is not legally obliged to be putting on the label saying that these are GMO foods. Europe, you cannot do that. 64 countries in the world, you cannot do that. If you are feeding a person GMO food, you have to put it on the label. But till today, in America, you're not obliged to. You could just throw in GMO in the soda pop, in the pizza, in the burger, and that's totally fine because, hey, law doesn't want you to do that. So that's the number one bummer. And my question is, and this is kind of a violation of a lot of fundamental human rights, like how can you put in something which potentially could be toxic? Okay, I agree, there's some studies that say they're not going to kill people overnight. But why, if it's not that harmful, why not let people know? Just like people in Europe have a right, people here have a right to know. Why would you conceal that information and say that, okay, we won't put on labels? So that's the first disturbing part. The other part is, in the studies, they found the same story like red meat, probable human carcinogen. So there's two chemicals, and again, because of the demand on the land to increase the production, we have amplified 250 times the amount of Roundup or herbicides that we are using. Glyphosate is the chemical molecule there. We have tremendously increased the, and why do we did that? Because the pests and the herbs got resistant to the normal dosages. So we said, okay, we need to spray more and more. And guess what happens? Some of that sprayed chemical is absorbed directly by the plant that we are eating. So it's kind of a catch-22. We want to increase the produce, but we can't avoid the risk of not having those chemicals unnaturally ingested in our bodies. And that's the problem. So that was Roundup. And now they realized, oh shoot, now Roundup, most of the herbs are resistant, just like antibiotics. The bugs are resistant because you use so much indiscriminately over the years. Now we realize that, okay, Roundup's not going to do it alone. Let's find a second. Zosyn is not doing it, let's add Bank now. So now we have a second molecule called 2,4-D herb. And that's very disturbing actually, more than glyphosate, because 2,4-D is an ingredient of the Agent Orange that we used in Vietnam War to cause widespread defoliation so that the rival group can be spotted through the air and they can be shot and stuff like that. So that was the reason why they created this 2,4-D or Agent Orange. So 2,4-D, which is an ingredient of Agent Orange, is now being allowed by I think it's USDA probably, is allowed to be used as a second ingredient on top of glyphosate so that we can still get the same amount of food. So that is a very disturbing study because now Agent Orange is totally banned all over the world, including US. You cannot use it because it's a carcinogen. Many people in the Vietnam War have contracted leukemias, lymphomas, mostly blood cancers, but other malignant tumors as well. So that was banned. Guess what guess what kind of tumors are caused by glyphosate? Most commonly Hodgkin's lymphoma. That's a tumor of the lymph nodes. Younger folks, I've seen many people in their 20s and 30s get Hodgkin's. It's kind of, it's very sad. But do we know why do they get it? Well, we can only say that these are risk factors that, okay, you have, how many strikes do you have against? If you're eating red meat, which is processed, if you're eating GMO foods, if you're eating large quantities of it, if you're not letting the liver detoxify through intermittent fasting, then there's so many hits, it's hard to create one-to-one correlation that, okay, you ate GMO food on this date, that's why you're getting cancer. It's not like that. It's a cumulative effect over the years. That I agree and admit. But these foods are not safe. They are totally not safe, especially if consumed in large quantities, because it doesn't give the liver and the body a chance to adapt or detoxify. But then again, how did they become legal, you ask? Like how are we allowing this to happen? Well, the studies in 1980s and 1990s were the studies that were funded by glyphosate and Roundup and all the different chemical industries. And they said to these investigators, okay, you find the results of these. And actually they found that they were not safe. Those studies did not get published, unfortunately, because you can't take money and not publish stuff for them. So they had another set of investigators redo the study. And this time they said, okay, no, they're okay. They're okay to be used. That's how we know that these are not safe. You have to do independent studies, not taking money from the maker of the chemical to know that it's a true study and that we can rely on that information. Otherwise, it's a waste of everybody's time. So now again, just like the nicotine industry was totally closed after people's desire to just know the real truth and stop this dissemination of false information that it soothes your throat and it doesn't cause cancer and stuff like that. Same thing is happening with GMO now. We are seeing a lot of protests. And now Congress is, I think they are still in the process of implementing, they're drafting it. But now they are saying that, okay, I think we need to do the same what they're doing in Europe. So finally we are agreeing that we need to have at least labels saying that, okay, these are GMO foods. So people can choose if they want to eat that food or not, because I think we all have a right to information, and then we have the right to make the decision. But if we don't know what we're eating, it's hard to know how it's affecting our body. So basically they said, okay, well, put it in some form. It could be a text, a symbol, an electronic or a digital link. You don't have to say it's GMO in direct. So they're just trying to encrypt it as much as they can, but at least they're going to put something on there. So that's a good move, I think. So I wanted to talk about this thing. It's very common these days. It's a very controversial issue in GI. It's called the leaky gut syndrome. And again, there's a lot of controversy in medicine. Half of the GI doctors do not believe this theory at all. They are like, okay, this does not exist. You guys just made it up. And some physicians believe it. It's like the fibromyalgia. Like some doctors say nothing like that, and some people are like, no, there's changes in functional MRI. You can see the brain changing in fibromyalgia. So it's kind of a thing where the knowledge is evolving. But basically, what's the concept? So think of the GMO. Now, some things we cannot avoid GMO, unfortunately. And Stephanie and I were talking the other day why wheat has become such a big problem. Because wheat was not a bad food. Over generations, our ancestors have grown. Wheat was the primal food that all the hunter-gatherers ate all the time. So what really happened? Like, how did our bodies suddenly say that, okay, I'm gluten sensitive or I have celiac disease? How did this thing just suddenly become such an epidemic? The answer is on the last slide that we talked about. If there is, like the big companies like Monsanto, which are kind of having all the seeds, and they have the patent to the seeds. So you can't even grow your own wheat because the seeds you're going to buy, they're already genetically altered. So, I mean, we're stuck with certain foods, like they have monopolized wheat so much that I don't know the numbers, but it's probably 90% which will be genetically modified. So to find the ancient Ezekiel bread or something that's ancient grain, that's probably a good bet. But rye is great because it's not wheat again. But wheat has been so much altered through genetically modifications that, and this is all in the last 50 years, that there's been a huge surge of celiac disease, and that's partly because of the herbicides like glyphosate that's coming with the GMOs, and partly from the GMO food itself because the chromosomes are altered. But this is what they claim. Again, this is all, I don't think it's very easy to prove this because this is not a CAT scan picture that you can take and say. This is all molecule-wise. So they say that gluten, which is the protein in wheat, has been altered a lot through the GMOs, glyphosate, and whatnot. So when it enters the body, the cells don't recognize it as gluten anymore. They are like confused, like what is this molecule? So whenever the body is confused, it attacks the cell. And it releases, it alters it, of course, through the enzyme called TTG, or tissue transglutaminase. But basically, it alters the molecule, and now it's kind of a threat to the body. So the body is reacting to it, just like an anaphylactic reaction. It says, okay, I'm going to throw in all the chemicals, all the leukotrienes, cytokines, all those big molecules, and try to destroy them. And what happens, of course, the body can't destroy that. It destroys more of its own cells in the process. And that's why the tight junctions, or the cells that are sticking to each other, starts coming apart. And then these molecules can seep into blood. So they're in the blood, antigens, or the trigger molecules. They're attacked by these Y-shaped things called immunoglobulins or antibodies, and they're sticking together. This is the classic immune complex that we call. So basically now they're stuck together, and unless you stop eating wheat, these continue to flow into the blood. That's the theory. So if someone takes 2 weeks off wheat and 2 weeks off milk, nothing else, even if they continue eating processed foods the way they're eating, I have a personal feeling and a strong claim at this point that they will have tremendous benefits. I'm not saying they'll get cured, because this is a lot of damage and it will take a lot of time to heal, but just 2 weeks has been shown to help in terms of reduction of fibromyalgia symptoms, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, because lots of these molecules are going everywhere. If they're going in the joints, you're getting osteoarthritis. If it's going in the heart, it's causing all the clogging of the arteries, decreased blood flow to the heart, decreased pumping of the blood to different organs, going to the brain, creating mini strokes and all those things on the changes on the arteries. So leaky gut syndrome is very famous for all the autoimmune diseases that you can think of: hypothyroid, psoriasis, ulcerative colitis, IBDs. Any organ that is targeted by autoimmune conditions, leaky gut has been said to play a role. And the incriminating molecule is gluten, not the only one. Anything that's genetically altered will cause it. But just because we eat wheat so much on a regular basis, that we have found that this is the main culprit in causing leaky gut. So I tell my folks all the time, if you are feeling tired, sleepy, not having energy, just try to avoid the processed foods, of course, but just do 2 weeks free of milk and free of wheat. Rice is fine, by the way. Rice is not that much a GMO problem at this point, so you can still get organic rice, like organic basmati rice or anything, but you can get organic wheat, unfortunately. I haven't seen one. So what about the GMO and the glyphosate, which is the herbicide sprayed on the GMO crops? Unfortunately, at this point, I don't think it's humanly possible to avoid GMOs altogether. We can minimize the exposure by taking less of all these processed foods, because we are having a generation where kids are getting more and more obese, and that has never happened. And they have found that this millennial generation will be the first generation in American history that will live a shorter lifespan than their parents. And that is frightening. Like, there is no reason, when we have so much antibiotics and so much of scientific development, for us to be living shorter lives. At this point, we were increasing lifespan. But because of diabetes and chronic medical conditions, they will live a shorter lifespan. That is established, unless they change their eating habits, of course. But this is the main problem. And this is not only the problem of fast foods, it's also the problem of the way the so-called fast foods are prepared. They have to make it delicious and cheap. And if you want cheap food, the food to go for is the GMO food, because that's growing in bulk and it's easy to kind of just lay hands on. Nobody wants to make organic French fries in McDonald's, so you gotta get what's cheapest. And I see you're grimacing your face there. I can imagine if it's organic, it won't taste very good. If it's like a French fry, probably. But yeah, it just shows like there's GMO food everywhere. There's GMO soy protein filler in the hamburger. Cows being fed the GMO corns, well, you get the cheese which is containing possibly GMO cheese. Now, high fructose corn syrup, all of us know and most of us avoid, thankfully, so that's kind of out of the picture. But yeah, there's so much of pesticide, herbicide, GMO food in the fast food. That's always better to prepare your own food at home and eat it. Even if you want French fries, you just process it, because then you're not exposing yourself. If you buy organic potatoes and just like fry them, that's not bad. But the moment we go for the easy way, it causes problems. And there's a big scientific community that believes a lot of the celiac disease is related not to the wheat, but the glyphosate that is sprayed on it. So it's not only the GMO, but the herbicide that we are spraying, and these are like antibiotics. They're killing all the prebiotic bacteria that are sitting there, because that's what they do. They kill herbicides, pesticides, they kill stuff. So they kill the good bacteria. When there's no good bacteria, the bad guys come in, the C. diff and the E. coli. But also, it just messes up our immune system. And one thing we did not talk about, the prebiotics, because there's such a big nervous system in our gut, we have a lot of neurons in our belly. So that's why the connection, the mind-stomach connection. They are foods that will help with curing anxiety and depression because of all the good neurotransmitters that they release. All the prebiotic foods, legumes, chickpeas, anything that's fresh, green, fiber-rich, all those things on the prebiotic list, they will help with the mood and anxiety and depression, because those are foods that will create those good neurotransmitters and chemicals in the body that will fight the other ones that don't do so. So this is again, this is not, I don't think all of it has been scientifically proven, but they are saying that these are the major problems with glyphosate, which is what we use in Roundup. Basically, there can be endocrine disturbances. There's more, and whenever there's endocrine disturbances, there will be weight issues because estrogens, the steroid hormones help to put on weight. Just like if someone is on prednisone for long, that's what estrogens do. They help, they cause you to gain weight. So all the endocrine disruptions, hypothyroidism is another one. Many people are getting hypothyroidism at a young age. Birth defects, cleft palates, they are again thought to be related to that. Now this is known, binding metals in the body and removing them. So glyphosate, these are what we call the chelation agents, which means all the heavy metals, or even like the metals that are good for the body, the trace metals, they will bind them. So now they have depleted the natural food, say sweet potato, which is rich in magnesium or something. All the micronutrients are leached by the glyphosate. So the body cannot absorb them because it's sticking with the glyphosate and glyphosate won't let it go. So that's why there's some school of thought that says that the genetically modified foods are nutritionally depleted. You are absorbing them, but you're not digesting them because glyphosate never dies. It's like plastic. If it's there on the soil, it will just be there forever. It takes a long time, I think, to degrade. More than plastic does. So that's the problem with these molecules. I don't know if the links to autism have been proven yet. These days seems like everything causes autism. It's kind of hard to know. But it does cause mutations and cellular DNA damage and cancer. So this is a great slide. It talks about how to distinguish for the people who have been kind enough, and actually the food industry has been very kind enough. They will always have these stickers, as you might have noticed, like the fruits and the vegetables. So the easiest way to remember is 4 is fair, 8 is engineered, and 9 is nice. Nic or organic, nice. So 4 is fair, 8 is engineered, 9 is nice. So what does it mean? All these stickers, we just have to look at the first numeral. If the first numeral is 9, it's organic, period. This is like a across the country thing. It's not a state thing. So anywhere you go, if it's 9, you don't even have to look at the organic section. You know that food is organic. What does organic mean? So organic means it's not GMO. Nobody has mixed the genes of a fish with the genes of a strawberry to confuse the body. And it has not been grown on land that has been treated with pesticides and herbicides. So the best food that we can have is obviously, as it says, grown naturally. Naturally in the meaning that it doesn't combine animal and plant genes to get better harvest. So best food is organic if we can get it. However, these, as you know, are pricey, probably double the price for GMO or even conventional. So conventional is fine, and we'll come to some foods which are better. You can buy it. I eat a lot of conventional foods too because they are fine. I mean, a little bit of toxin is probably good for the body because the body remembers how to detoxify. Just like a little bit of infection, they have the hygiene hypothesis. If you have a little bit of infection all the time, like common cold, the body knows how to track it right so that it doesn't develop autoimmune conditions, because then it doesn't get confused with the good molecules versus the bad molecules. But if you don't fight infections at all, you're at risk of autoimmunity. They call it the hygiene hypothesis. So that's why developing countries like India, we don't have that many autoimmune things like psoriasis, ulcerative colitis. We have lots of infections though, like people dying from tuberculosis and all those viral diarrheas and whatnot. But there's very less autoimmune problems. But that was kind of a tangential thing. So basically, 4 is fair, 4 is conventional. So there is still herbicides, unfortunately, and pesticides that have been thrown in there. And probably they're not GMOs, but we can't say that because in America they're not obliged to tell us that. So all we can tell is that there's some chemicals in the food. Well, when you get to 8, is the worst thing to get. So it's probably, if you're going to eat 8, you're probably going to buy some medicines for high blood pressure, diabetes, hopefully not for chemotherapy. But yeah, it's a risky venture to go down this line. No matter how much we have to cut financially, I think food should deserve recognition. And if you're not healthy, you don't enjoy life anyway. So I strongly believe in eating right, because if you're in the right body, you just feel like doing stuff. So this is a very great synopsis of how to recognize these foods. I think 4 is fine, and organic is obviously the best, but GMOs should be avoided. So when is 4 fine and when is 4 not fine, the conventional foods? So a very logical reasoning, and this works very well actually, is that if people are eating foods that have a peel or a cover over it, guess what glyphosate will do? Probably won't penetrate that much. Because if you have a cantaloupe or a pineapple, all the glyphosate you're spraying is still kind of sticking to the exterior shell. It's not getting absorbed into the interior pulp as much. So that's their concept, and it works pretty well actually. They have found that they call it the dirty dozen, which are the foods you should avoid if you are going if you're going conventional. And the clean 15 are the ones is fine to eat those, even if they are grown conventionally, because the herbicide exposure is very low. And you can see all of these are things that are covered. So a good rule of thumb is just to remember that anything that's covered and you have to like peel it off is fine. If you're not able to do that, as is the case with strawberries or green leafy vegetables, collards, kale, spinach, celery, such healthy foods, but not so much if you don't buy it organic. Unfortunately, you don't get the same benefits. So I'll send you guys a PDF of the slides just so that you have a copy for this. But basically, that's the concept. Onions, again, you can peel it, so that works. So a great way to escape some of the side effects of these foods. So I'll kind of sum up here. So health hazards of GMOs, basically, these are foods that have been chemically sprayed with a lot of pesticides, herbicides, so all the good bacteria are dying, and then glyphosate never dies, so it's sticking in for long periods. And then the mutations and all the changes they cause in the genes. So avoid GMOs as much as possible. And these foods can lead to allergies and autoimmunity. So anybody who has allergies, fatigue, chronic pain, try to avoid the GMO foods, try to avoid the processed foods, try to avoid the wheat and dairy for 2 weeks. Fresh fruits and vegetables, you can never go wrong. Grains, legumes, chickpeas, you can never go wrong. No matter avocados, no such thing as bad fat. So in avocados at least. So we can't rely a lot, unfortunately, on the health organizations like ADA and AHA, unfortunately, when we have ties with big groups. So I think that will be the end of the talk. Thank you for letting me do this. It was.
Thank you for doing it. It was excellent.
So, any questions, anybody? All righty, sounds good. Thanks for coming tonight.
So like on the ingredient list, will they put GMO in there, like on the ingredients?
Great question. They will not,
They won't even put it there?
because they are not obliged to by law right now. 2 years later, they will have to. But for the next 2 years, processed foods will have GMOs, and we would not be able to know. But we do know that processed meat, processed pizzas, everything is GMO because it's cheap. That's what they do. They want to cut corners. So, all right, great.
I didn't know there was stickers.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I was told that 4 meant that they put like a wax on it. So I always check like and then I saw, I'm like, oh, it is an apple, 'cause